You're trying to get smart, fast, right, cut through all the noise and figure out what really matters. That's exactly what we do here. Today, we're diving deep into the story of one ship, the USS Clay, APA 39. Think of it like a shortcut to understanding a really vital piece of World War II history, and the surprising life of a vessel that went from civilian roots right into the heart of the Pacific War, and even beyond that.
Yeah, and we've pulled together quite a bit for this official Navy records. A good overview from Wikipedia, and also a really detailed historical account of her service. Our mission, so to speak, is to pull out the key moments, the really fascinating twists in the life of this attack transport.
Okay, let's get right into it then. The USS Clay. It didn't actually start as a Navy ship, did it? It had a totally different beginning.
That's absolutely right, and that's one of the, I think, most interesting parts of her story. She was laid down October 14th, 1942. Originally, she was the SS Sea Carp. That was a maritime commission hull, MC Hull 274, built out in San Francisco by Western Pipe and Steel.
SS Sea Carp, so one of those civilian steamships, part of that huge maritime commission push.
Exactly. Part of that massive wartime effort to, rapidly build up the U.S. merchant fleet, essential for logistics, for supply lines.
So built for trade, not fighting. But things changed fast, didn't they? Our sources say it happened pretty quickly.
Oh, very quickly. She was launched January 23, 1943, and actually christened SS Sea Angel. Wikipedia notes that name change. But even before she was, fully finished, the Navy saw this critical need. They needed ships to get troops right to the battle zones.
And that led to the first reclassification almost right after launch.
Precisely. Early 43, the Navy acquires her. She's designated AP-84, just as standard transport. But then the need became even more specific for attack personnel transports, APAs. These ships weren't just taxis. They had to land troops and their gear right onto hostile beaches using their own landing craft. So February 43, barely a month after launch, she's reclassified again. APA 39. And that's when she gets the name USS Clay.
USS Clay, named for Clay County. And not just one county, right? The list is surprisingly long. Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, all the way to Texas and West Virginia.
It really is quite a common name. Sort of connects the ship right back to the American heartland, doesn't it?
It does. So after this quick renaming, she gets partially commissioned. June 43.
That's right. June 29, 1943, under Commander Hans B. Olson. But the immediate job was just getting her from the West Coast, where she was built, over to New York for more work.
Wow, cross-country voyage for a ship not even fully ready. Really shows the urgency.
Absolutely. But then, arriving in New York in August 43, she's actually decommissioned again.
Decommissioned? Why?
For a major conversion. At Todd Shipyard in Hoboken, New Jersey. They needed to transform her into a proper Bayfield-class attack transport. Think of these Bayfield-class ships as, well, the dedicated amphibious assault platforms of their day, purpose-built for combat landings.
Okay, so a serious overhaul to make her fit for purpose. It wasn't until December 43, under Captain E.W. Abdill, that she was recommissioned and finally ready for war.
December 21st, 1943, exactly. Ready to head into the Pacific. Quite the transformation in, just over a year.
Amazing speed. Okay, so she's finally a warship. What happens first? Trials and training.
Yep, the standard procedure. Post-commissioning trials, then a shakedown cruise off the East Coast, down the Chesapeake Bay. Really critical for testing all the systems, getting the crew working together, ironing out any kinks.
And there are a few kinks, right? Sources mention some initial problems, radar, a pump.
Yeah, a couple of things. Issues with the SG radar, which was vital, for detection of the port feed pump. Nothing major, but exactly the sort of thing you want to find and fix before you head into combat.
Makes sense. Get everything working perfectly.
Absolutely. And these shakedown cruises did their job. By January 1944, the Clay was deemed ready. She sailed for Pearl Harbor. And she wasn't empty, carrying a big contingent of Marines. Over 1,500 men from the 39th Marine Replacement Battalion and the 17th Marine Depot Company.
Wow, packed with troops heading straight for the Pacific Theater. Must have been a tense voyage. Any incidents?
There was one moment, yeah. During the trip, one of the escorts, the destroyer USS Franks, got a sonar contact. Believed it was a Japanese sub.
Really? What happened?
Well, the Franks went after it, dropped depth charges. The Clay had to maneuver defensively, just in case. Ultimately, no sub was confirmed sunk or anything, but it was definitely a sharp reminder of the danger out there.
A close call right at the start of her war service. So she gets to Hawaii. More training, I assume.
Yes, intensive training exercises in Hawaiian waters.
Yeah.
Practicing amphibious landings over and over. Getting the ship's crew and the troops ready for the real thing. There was actually a mission planned for Kavieng on New Ireland. But it got canceled
Canceled? Why?
because Allied air power had basically neutralized the Japanese forces there already, made a landing unnecessary. So her first actual combat operation was still to come.
Which brings us to Saipan, the Marianas. June 1944. This sounds like where the USS Clay really got into the fight.
It absolutely was. The Marianas campaign was huge, strategically vital. And the Clay was involved right from D-Day, June 15th. Her first job that morning was actually part of a feint landing on Saipan's northwestern coast.
A feint, so a trick to draw the enemy away.
Exactly. Tactical deception. Pull Japanese defenders away from the real landing beaches on the southwestern coast. The Clay lowered her landing craft, they formed up into assault waves, made it look like a big attack was coming in there. Interestingly, no Marines were actually in those initial boats for the feint. Minimized risk while still creating the diversion. They had intelligence observers on the Clay watching the Japanese reaction.
Clever. Risky, but clever.
Yeah.
But later that same day, she was involved in the main invasion.
Oh, yes. Early afternoon, she moved into the designated transport area off the main beaches. The embarked Marines loaded into the landing craft. By 3 p.m., those boats were hitting Red Beach No. 2, part of the main assault sector. And the resistance was fierce. Plus, there was a big coral reef offshore, making things even harder. But the Clay got her troops, elements of the 2nd Marine Division, ashore into that fight.
And the ship itself took casualties on board during this. That must have hit the crew hard.
It was a grim reality check. Sailors brought back 41 casualties from the fighting ashore. Some were already dead, sadly. Others died later on board despite the efforts of the medical team. Lieutenant Commander Ritchie, the ship's doctor, even went over to help on a nearby LST that was acting as a temporary hospital ship.
Heavy stuff. And wasn't there that incredibly close call with torpedoes before Saipan, near Inuitok?
Yes, that was just days before, June 1st. Lookouts spotted 2 torpedoes coming straight at the ship, one off the port bow, one off the starboard. Extremely close range.
Both sides. How did they miss?
It seems impossible, but they did. They passed narrowly down each side of the hull. The whole formation took evasive action, but they never even found the submarine that fired them. An absolutely astonishing escape.
Unbelievable luck. And even at Saipan itself, the ship came under fire. A plane attack.
That's right. June 16th, Captain Abdill himself spotted a Japanese fighter coming in. The ship's anti-aircraft gunners opened up like crazy, fired a lot of ammo, but the plane actually got away, apparently undamaged. Later, they also took incoming artillery fire from nearby Tinian Island. Shell fragments landed on deck, but thankfully no serious damage or casualties from that.
Wow. Constant danger. And amidst all that, the crew had the solemn task of burying Marines who died on board at sea.
Yes, a very powerful and sobering duty. On June 20th, Private First Class James McCardle died from his wounds. The next morning, he was buried at sea with full military honor. Same for Sergeant George Demjock a few days later. It really brings home the human cost, doesn't it? These individual tragedies within the big picture.
Absolutely, a heavy burden. Okay, so after Saipan, the USS Clay keeps moving across the Pacific. Next major stop, Leyte, Philippines, late 1944.
Correct. The light operation, another massive amphibious assault, the Clay was there for the initial landings on October 20th, transporting troops, bringing in essential supplies, all under, as you mentioned before, the constant threat of Japanese air attacks. The ship's own history notes, she wasn't strictly combat loaded because of the sheer volume and type of cargo, but she got the crucial materials ashore.
And it wasn't just the enemy causing problems, there was an accident too, a collision.
There was. While maneuvering in the crowded waters off Morotai early November, the Clay collided with a Liberty ship, the John Owen. Luckily, neither ship was badly damaged, no casualties reported, but it just shows how chaotic and hazardous those busy anchorages could be.
Right. Then came Luzon, Lingayen Gulf landings, January 1945. By this point, the kamikazes were a major factor, weren't they?
A huge factor. Desperate tactics. The invasion of Luzon on January 9th faced intense resistance, including waves of kamikaze attacks. The Clay's crew actually saw the escort carrier USS Gitkunbe get hit nearby, badly damaged. Her own gunners were firing constantly, trying to fend off these suicide planes. Despite the chaos all around, the Clay miraculously avoided being hit herself. In fact, Japanese propaganda actually reported the USS Clay as sunk during the Lingayen operation.
Wow. Getting reported sunk usually means you were right in the thick of it. And she kept working, right? Bringing in reinforcements, taking out wounded?
She certainly did. After landing her first wave of troops, she went back to Leyte, picked up elements of the 1st Cavalry Division, and took them to Luzon. Then she evacuated wounded soldiers, sailed down to Guadalcanal to embark elements of the 6th Marines, getting ready for the next big push.
Which leads us straight to Okinawa, April 1945, arguably one of the toughest, bloodiest battles of the entire war.
Okinawa was horrific. And the Clay was there from the start, April 1st, D-Day. Arriving before dawn, starting to unload Marines, again facing intense air attacks, dealing with heavy weather. Another tricky coral reef made the boat operations difficult, but they got the troops ashore, took on casualties for treatment, all while dodging enemy planes.
The sources mention severe storms, needing to take evasive action even in the anchorage to avoid collisions. It sounds utterly chaotic.
It was constant high alert, frequent air raid warnings, laying smoke screens for cover, even the ship dragging her anchor in gale-force winds. The pressure on the crew must have been immense, but they kept at it, supporting the landings and the fighting ashore until she finally departed for San Francisco on April 5th. She needed an overhaul, getting ready for the planned invasion of Japan itself.
But that invasion never happened, of course. The war ended. The news of Japan's surrender in August 45. It must have reached the Clay while she was heading back to the Pacific after her refit.
That's right, she was en route. The ship's historian wrote about the incredibly swift ending to the war. It must have been a moment of, well, overwhelming relief, maybe disbelief too, but the Allies were still cautious, concerns about isolated Japanese units maybe not getting the word or ignoring it. So the Clay continued her voyage, arriving in Light Gulf on August 17th.
So the fighting's over, but her job isn't quite done. Occupation duty comes next.
Exactly. From Light, she went to Cebu in the Philippines, then loaded up Army troops, the 182nd Regimental Combat Team, for occupation duty in Japan. September 1st, she sails right into Tokyo Bay, served as the flagship for Temporary Squadron 13, part of the Tokyo Force under Captain Bartman.
Imagine sailing into Tokyo Bay then, seeing the devastation, passing the wreck of the battleship Nagato. Must have been incredibly sobering.
Undoubtedly. A stark view of the war's end. The Clay landed her troops in the heavily damaged industrial area between Yokohama and Tokyo. Then she continued carrying occupation forces around Japan and even went up to Tianjin in China, playing a really key role in stabilizing things right after the surrender.
And then, Operation Magic Carpet, bringing the troops home. The Clay was part of that huge effort, too.
A big part. After her occupation tasks, she started the vital job of ferrying thousands of servicemen back to the States, made 2 full round trips across the Pacific on Magic Carpet duty, bringing soldiers, sailors, Marines home.
There's that touching story in the notes, too, about rescuing a sick patient from a Liberty ship during one of those runs. Heart trouble, malaria, even after the war, is still helping out.
Yeah, a nice detail. Shows the crew's character. And on that first Magic Carpet trip back, they organized a full Thanksgiving dinner on board for all the returning troops.
That must have meant so much to those guys, finally heading home after everything.
You have to think so. A little bit of normalcy of home on the way back.
So finally, after this incredible wartime journey over 100,000 miles steamed today, the USS Clay is decommissioned in New York, April 29, 1946. What a career in just a few short years.
A truly remarkable wartime service. And recognized, too. She earned 4 battle stars for her involvement in the Marianas, Light, and Okinawa campaigns, plus a whole host of other awards. China Service Medal, American Campaign Medal, the Asiatic-Pacific Campaign Medal with those 4 stars, World War II Victory Medal, Navy Occupation Service Medal with the Asia clasp, Philippines Presidential Unit Citation, Philippines Liberation Medal. Quite a list.
But even that wasn't the absolute end for the ship itself, was it? She had a whole second life.
She did indeed. Struck from the Naval Register in July 46. Then, in September 46, sold to American President Lines. They renamed her SS President Johnson.
Yeah.
She started a new career as a merchant ship, initially based out of Mobile, Alabama.
From dodging torpedoes and landing Marines under fire to hauling freight, what a shift.
It really shows how adaptable and useful these wartime ships were, even in peacetime. She changed hands and names a couple more times over the years, became the SS LaSalle for Waterman Steamship Corporation, briefly went to another company, then back to Waterman.
And her final voyage, like so many ships from that era, the scrapyard.
Sadly, yes. In November 1974, the ship that was once the USS Clay, then sailing as the SS LaSalle, was sold for scrapping in Taiwan, broken up by Suihon Steel Enterprise. A quiet end after such an eventful life.
So just to wrap this up, the journey of the USS Clay, civilian hull, rapid wartime transformation, surviving incredible dangers in major Pacific battles, then nearly 3 decades of commercial service. It's quite a story of adaptability.
It really is. I mean,
Yeah.
a few things really stand out. That incredibly fast change from a standard merchant design to a specialized attack transport that speaks volumes about the urgency and industrial power of the time, and the sheer danger, those torpedo near misses, the constant air attacks, the kamikazes, it hammers home the relentless peril these crews faced.
Right, day in, day out.
Yeah, and her involvement wasn't minor. That Saipan feint, the main landings, Lotte, Luzon, Okinawa, key
Yeah.
moments. Then bringing troops home with magic carpet, occupation duty, she was a real workhorse.
Absolutely. It really makes you think, doesn't it? The Clay is just one ship. There were hundreds, thousands of similar vessels. How many other stories like this are out there? Stories of these unsung workhorses, each representing this immense logistical effort, this huge human cost that ultimately shaped history. It kind of pushes you to think about the vast scale of it all and all those individual contributions, ship by ship, person by person, that made the difference.